If you're ready to unlock your potential to transform the world around you, then join us here on the Lovin Leadership Podcast as we dive into the art of leadership, exploring cutting-edge strategies and timeless wisdom, empowering you to become the exceptional leader you were born to be. You'll learn from inspiring interviews with visionaries, changemakers, and thought leaders who give us practical and actionable, real-life leadership strategies, and we'll celebrate authenticity and empathy because leadership is about connecting with others on a profound level. So if you're ready to transform your leadership journey, don't miss a single episode of the Lovin Leadership Podcast. Subscribe today for access to a wealth of wisdom, inspiration, and actionable strategies. Let's redefine leadership and create a world where every leader leads with love, passion, and purpose. This podcast is proudly supported by the College of St. Mary, dedicated to uncovering the essence of exceptional leadership for today's world and beyond. Enrich your leadership journey alongside a cohort of industry experts through the Master of Science in Organizational Leadership program at CSM. Crafted to suit your schedule, this online degree can be yours in just 12 months. Are you prepared to soar in your career? Take the leap forward with the College of St. Mary, shaping leaders for tomorrow. Explore your potential today and learn more at csm.edu/MSOL. Welcome to the Lovin Leadership Podcast, where we bring you interviews with extraordinary leaders who are changing the world. I'm Dr. Beth Merkel, your Lovin Leadership Podcast host. And on this episode, we welcome one of my heroes, Dr. Mark Rutland, to the show. And over his outstanding career, Dr. Rutland has served as the senior pastor of Calvary Assembly in Orlando, Florida. I had to practice saying that. He served as president of Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida, and as president of Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Dr. Rutland is also a best-selling author who shares the lessons he learned from turning these three organizations around from the brink of failure to thriving communities in his book, Relaunch. I devoured this book in a single day, and I recommend it to everyone. Relaunch is only one of 20 books Dr. Rutland has written. Copies of his book, Nevertheless, and Kings and Prophets are both sitting up on my nightstand waiting their turn, and I hope to get to them soon. Dr. Rutland and his wife, Alison, are founders of Global Servants, which they began in 1977. Through Global Servants, Dr. Rutland founded ministries in Ghana and Thailand, including the House of Grace Home for Tribal Girls in Chiang Rai, Thailand, that provides care and education to empower girls who might otherwise be victims of human trafficking. I pulled this description right off the House of Grace website, and it was so captivating, I have to share it with you. It says, House of Grace Thailand has empowered hundreds of girls in their physical journey out of oppression, their spiritual journey to Christ, their political journey to citizenship, their educational journey to knowledge, and their financial journey to independence. If that's not love and leadership, then I just don't know what is. So it's easy to understand why Dr. Rutland is in high demand as a speaker for leadership seminars and conferences in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome to the Lovin Leadership Podcast, Dr. Mark Rutland.
Well, thank you, Dr. Merkel, and thank you for that extravagant introduction. I feel like we ought to just hang up right now.
Oh, all true. I am not a fiction writer, so every bit of that is 100% true. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I absolutely devoured your book, Relaunch, in one night, basically. I just could not put it down. And I found the book because my dear friend, Amber Vanderberg, who's an Oral Roberts University alum and founder of the Pathways Group, she was a guest on the show a couple of episodes ago and just was an amazing wealth of information. And she told me when we had cut and, finished the show, she said, Beth, if you want to spread the message of how to be a powerful and loving leader, then you have to read the book Relaunch. And so I did. You don't let those kind of recommendations pass you by. And as soon as I was finished, turned the last page, I said, I have to invite Dr. Rutland on the Lovin Leadership Podcast. And thank God, here you are. You said yes. And I think this is a fantastic show. So.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be with you, Dr. Merkel, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book. It really has been a good book for us. It's sold and tremendously and continues to sell. And I get a lot of other response to it from other organizations, colleges, universities, and churches and businesses that are looking for an organizational comeback. And it means a lot to me. I don't take it for granted. Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, perhaps particularly in these post-COVID days, we just need a foothold. And Relaunch, which I know your leadership is so much broader than just one book, but it really was a game changer for me. And I know it will be a game changer for our audience as well. So in this episode, we'll kind of focus on the lessons that you share from the Relaunch book. And I want to start by saying early on, you talked in the Relaunch book about the idea that leaders must be artists of the human spirit. That captured me right off the bat. And I want to know, what do you mean by that? And how can I know if I'm being an artist of the human spirit?
Well, that's a very good question. I've been interviewed on that book hundreds of times, I think, and I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. So thank you for picking up on that phrase. When one thinks about an artist, one tends to think of sensitivity and creativity, the ability to say, for example, a visual artist, nuances of color, of variations, design, those kinds of things. I think that too many leaders see the humanity around them as a single flat horizon, that everybody looks the same, talks the same, thinks the same as they do. And I believe that the best leaders, the most creative leaders, are sensitive to the human spirit, that there are different people that need different things. You can see it in child rearing. You can't raise all your children the same way.
No, I tried. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You think you've mastered it after the first one, and then the second one says, have I got a surprise for you? And it's the same thing is true in leading, whether it's staff or volunteers or others around you, to be that creative person who is sensitive to the human spirit and yet sees oneself as fashioning something out of it. The artist also is a creator. It's to have all the emotional sensitivity and not have any sense of direction and purpose may mean that you feel things deeply, but you don't know where you're going. So that's what I was trying to communicate with that sort of extravagant phrase.
It's not extravagant in my mind. It's about as true as a statement can possibly get. And I think as leaders, often we think of the people in our organization, the human side, as kind of a bother, as something to almost be overcome. We can manage that, or we can, you're not going to say this out loud, but in your mind, we can suppress that. Get past it.
I have even heard people say it out loud. I've heard people say, if I could just do leadership and not have to mess with people, everything would be okay. And I always want to say, you see, absent people, you're not a leader, you're a hermit.
Who do you think you're leading?
People are all there is.
It's so true. And I teach at College of St. Mary. I am the director of a master's online master's program in organizational leadership. And I say this again and again when students will talk about, well, it's just business. I have to handle my business life one way and my real life, my spiritual life, my faith life a different way. I said, well, who do you think is doing the business? It is the people, and every decision we make is their business. So I love that you put this front and center, and obviously it is something I believe in, and I believe our leadership has to recognize the human spirit from here on out, because we've been doing a whole lot of ignoring it, and it hasn't been working so great.
I hope your students know how blessed they are. That's not what they're going to hear in every master's or MBA or leadership master. So I hope they understand that they're hearing something that's a little more profound than just 2 and 2 = 4. So good for you.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. One of our key guides to the program is leading with love. And it took me a while to be able to say that out loud and take the risk. And finally I was like, I cannot say it any other way.
Good.
And I think that's what you're talking about here. But because it's not really defined, right? Art is in the eye of the beholder. I just finished a quilt, and some people are going to say it's gorgeous, and some people are going to say, oh, it's, garish, and all opinions in between. And I think when we think of art, it is very subjective. But in leadership, how can I know I'm being an artist of the human spirit?
Well, I think that, as I said a minute ago, I think what the key issue, to use your phrase, leading with love, the key issue is sensitivity. One simply can't be a loving leader if you're not sensitive to what's going on. Now, having said that, I rush to add, it doesn't mean being sensitive as a leader doesn't mean being easily wounded. So it's an odd conflict of emotions where you have to have a thick hide to lead, and yet lead people in a way that you don't expect them to have the same thick hide. So you need to be more sensitive with them and less sensitive with yourself. And what you say about the beauty of, say, your quilt, for example, that is true in a sense, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but there are some objective indices of beauty, symmetry, structure, organization, and that is certainly true in leadership. So yes, you want to lead with love, but you want to lead towards something with love, and your objective indices are there. Obviously, you have to have courses in management and business, and if you're in business to sell refrigerators, it doesn't matter what a great leader you are if you don't sell refrigerators. So the beauty of the organization also has to be functional, is what I'm trying to say. And that quilt, for example, that's actually a pretty good example. Somebody might not really admire your concept of the design on that quilt, but on a cold night they will.
Right. So yeah, the application, whether you appreciate the actual beauty or not.
Yeah. There's the functionality. And that's the thing with leadership. Yes, you want to be sensitive, a creative artist of the human spirit. But on the other hand, sell refrigerators.
I think it can also be about supporting and allowing your people to be artists of their own human spirit, right? Because it's a lot of responsibility for us as leaders to be able to tune in and be sensitive. And yes, we all should. We're going to have good days and bad days. But if we can support our people in being their own, Meg Wheatley calls it warrior of the human spirit, and you call it an artist of the human spirit. I love that those two kind of come together.
Sure.
And help them do it for themselves. And there's so much potential growth. And I think if someone that I'm leading, starts out in this certain position with these skills, and we've accomplished X, Y, and Z goals. And then after a while, a period of time, 6 months, a year, I don't know, whatever, if that person has grown and changed. And like you said, that when we can measure this growth and this change in many ways, not all of them, and that organizational objectives have been met and the organization is moving forward. I think that's artistic and beautiful.
Yeah, that's the agonizing tension of leading an organization, is understanding that it's an organization full of people. It's also an organization that serves people. So you can't just plow the people under the chariot wheels of leadership. On the other hand, that you have to also be able to motivate people to actually do the job. Things have to be done. The organization has to be, yes, beautiful and sensitive and loving and functional. And it has to, you have to earn the right to fulfill your mission. And part of earning that right is being able to demonstrably show the success. It has to do what it's supposed to do. You have to appeal to the stockholders as well as the public. And it's easy to get off balance one way or the other on those. It's easy to think, if I just can get everybody to love me, that's fine. And if I can get everybody to love me all the time, that will put you in the nut house. Or if you can say, well, if I can just sell refrigerators, then I don't care if everybody in the organization hates me. And that just becomes toxic. So that's the tension that I try to teach in leadership is you're called to make this organization work, but you're not called to destroy yourself and everybody else in doing it.
Mm. And the artistry is in the balance there.
Yes, it is.
Wow. You've given me so much to think about already. My brain always just goes 90 miles an hour on these shows, but you touched on an important point, I think, and that's that so often leaders can fail to balance the human side, the organizational side, and I speak about them like they're two different sides. No, they are actually very enmeshed, but we can kind of fail to do that balance, or we're not really good at it. And so many leaders want to get control of a situation, especially one when there's great change, when there's great risk involved. And when an organization gets to the point where it's turn around or die, and there's a lot at risk.
Yes.
You want to control the chaos and just move forward. But I love that you talk about this balance in terms of chaos and control.
Yes.
And you used a great, as in a metaphor, is it a simile? I don't remember. But you referred to chaos as the steam and control as the valves of the change machine. And I'd love it if you talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it is one of the really important aspects of leadership, because it kind of speaks to what you were just asking. And that is, part of it is objective. It's mathematical. Part of it, however, is intuitive. And that is the leader, let's take the senior executive leader of any organization, a college president, a lead pastor, the president of a corporation, whatever it is, the owner of a business. Their responsibility is to make sure that the engine is clicking along, that it's going fast enough to keep the steam going. But at the same time, they have to be sensitive to the fact that it could heat up to the point where it blows sky high. Mm. So sometimes they have to open the valves. They have to loosen things up, lighten up, slow. And then other times it gets like that it's going so fast They have to tighten the valve, slow it down. Now, I'm certainly not a big defender of the Fed, trust me. But the concept of the Fed is that, isn't it? If the economy, it looks like it's slowing down and grinding to a halt, then you lower interest rates and open the valves and see if you can get money and economy flowing. But then if it cranks up to the fact that it looks like the inflation rate is just going to blow the thing to smithereens, then you tighten down. How? Raise interest rates, tighten money, make it harder for quit buying bonds, to tighten it all down. So the leader, the executive leader, has to live in that tension between chaos and control. And the challenge is, don't assign a moral or ethical value to one of those. If one tends to be a control person, you think of control as good. But it's not an ethical term, it's a diagnostic term. The same thing is true of chaos. Chaos is not bad. and sometimes you have to actually tolerate or even generate seasons of chaos. There are times, for example, when a policy manual won't help you. You can get a policy manual so tight nobody can move. But what we've got to have here is growth and energy and life. On the other hand, if you don't know where any of your employees are and you've lost track of, the CFO is calling you long distance from Las Vegas, then you may have tolerated a little extra level of chaos. You may need to tighten it up. Everybody's got to follow the rules, be in the office, know what they're doing, check in, clock in. So the challenge is twofold. One is every one of your employees feels comfortable at one of those places or the other. There are people in your organization that love control. They just their first word is not mama or dada. It's purchase order.
Deadline.
It's followed immediately by the word triplicate. I just love that. There are other people that are sort of like full-grown teenagers. They just want the room messed up. They don't feel comfortable unless it's just all in the turmoil. So as a result of that, the person in the leadership position, you're like Ben-Hur in the chariot with these horses that all want to run, and you're holding the reins. But the challenge is you don't want to diminish their desire to run. You want thoroughbreds to run, but you got to get them to run in the traces you want them to. So what that means is somebody in your organization is going to be mad at you all the time.
Oh, that's such an important lesson.
You just got to get your mind around that. Oh. Now, the second challenge is not a them challenge. It's a you challenge. And that is, you also, as the leader, you feel more comfortable one of those places or the other. There are leaders that are just chaos agents. They just love to keep everything torn up. There are other people that given their way would manage it to death. It would just everything, nobody could move because the valves are all so tight. So you have to get in touch with where you are personally and be able to shift along that chaos control continuum depending on the circumstances and the changing realities that you're dealing with as a leader. So the metaphor that I use is that it's like a video game. And that you're going sideways and the goblins are coming at you this way. And you got to be able to shift sideways and deal with those. But here's the thing. Young leaders always think, I'll get so good at this that the goblins won't come anymore. But that's not the way video games work. Every time you get good at it, you go to a different level. And the better you get at it, the more goblins come and the faster they come.
Yes. That is such a great example of leadership.
That's the reason I say you've got to be able to flex between chaos and control, dealing with the fact that everybody wants to be on the people in your accounting department all think the high octane salesman who won't turn in his expense account. They hate that guy. But you love what he sells and produces, so you're constantly trying to tone down accounting. Come on, calm down, fix his mistakes. I need him to sell this stuff. But then there comes a moment where you can't tolerate his chaos anymore. And you say to yourself, what I'd rather have is 3 salesmen who sell twice as much as he does and turn their expense accounts in. So that's the challenge of flexing on the chaos control continuum. That's probably more a response than you wanted to your question.
It is. It's the perfect response. It's exactly what we need to know, because I think sometimes we can get real formulaic about this leadership business and say, well, there's a continuum, and on one end is chaos, and one end is control. Here's the sweet spot. Okay, turn the page of the textbook. Like, there's so much more to it, as you just let us know, than meets the eye, that we really have to consider and be prepared for. Because watching so much chaos, hey, I am something of a control freak. So watching this much chaos in an organization, especially when we're just forming, right, an organization, or we're just launching new change, it can be really unsettling. And I want everybody, come on, everybody, get your act together now. It's been 10 minutes and that's enough chaos for me. But we really have to recognize what the chaos is, and perhaps be able to discern, is it destructive chaos, or is it creative and innovative chaos?
That's it. All the energy and the creativity and the vitality, that's all on the chaos side. But it's also where the train wrecks happen. All the control and regularity and dependability and consistency, that all happens on the control side. But the reason there's no train wrecks can be because there's no trains moving. Mm-hmm. So that's the tensions, and it can make the leader look undependable as a schizophrenic. You don't want to bounce from starboard to port, back and forth crazy. But there will be times when you have to say, all right, everybody, I need you to report to work. I need you in at 8:00. There are other times when you have to be able to say to the people in accounting, hey, look, tolerate some chaos. What we need now is energy and sales and vitality. And so that challenges the leader personally, and it challenges the organization.
Mm. And just opens the door to all the potential that's bottled up. But again, with that understanding and that recognition, which kind of brings me to our next idea. And that is, in order to do this balancing, that is such an integral part of the artistry of leadership. We really have to know ourselves and what we're capable of as human beings, as professionals. Yeah. And I love that you make such a strong point of that in the book Relaunch. And I know some people in our audience are going to argue with me and say, well, isn't knowing thyself first, isn't that selfish? Isn't that self-centered? And aren't we as leaders called to be servants and other-centric? How would you respond to that?
I see their point. I guess I hear what they're saying, but the problem is that's a very limited view. An unhealthy, unwholesome, toxic leader is damaging to everybody else. A healthy, whole, well, responsible, orderly life makes for a responsible, orderly leader. And that's good for everybody else. So in other words, if I have 100 people that work for me and I really love them, according to using your term of love and leadership, if I love those people, I need to get me in order. Because if I'm out of order, if I'm toxic and poisonous and angry and hurt and confused and even, unethical or ultimately illegal even, then I damage all those people. So not having good self-care, self-discipline, self-control, all those things that sound so ugly and hyphenated, they're actually concern for the people that I serve. I can't, how can I say, you can't give away what you don't have.
Oh.
And if you haven't got the leader together, how can you lead people in a positive and helpful, wholesome way? So your first responsibility as a leader is to get your own house in order. That's your number one responsibility. It's not selfish. It's actually ultimately selfless. Because Paul, if I can quote scripture, Paul writes to one of his churches and he says, I guess this is all right on your business podcast. So
it's absolutely all right.
St. Paul says, if I had been with you, I would have given you my own soul. Okay, that's a fine thing to say if your soul is worth giving. So your first responsibility as a leader is that you have to become the leader that everybody needs. So it isn't selfish. It's preparing yourself for sacrificial and loving leadership.
Oh, it's your own oxygen mask first, right?
That's a good. I wish I had said that. Yes. Yeah. I like that. That's right.
I picked it up from you somewhere along the line.
Oh,
sure. It's, I have worked with leaders on both ends of what we're talking about, leaders who just totally took no time for themselves, no self-reflection, no introspection, no exercise, because they're just swamped and every second of every day goes to the people. And I've also had leaders who, something of a let them eat cake. And so here we are back into a balance. But I am so glad you made this point as strongly as you did, because that's another thing that I put forth. Take time, schedule half an hour in your schedule for eyes closed and relaxing. Okay, we'll say 3 out of the 5 days that gets interrupted a little bit, but schedule it and utilize it and notice the difference before you take that rest and after. And the pushback I get on that is, I don't have time for that. I literally have 12 meetings scheduled today. Well, you know what? Look at your mindset in the last meeting before you take this half hour, and look at the mindset in your first meeting after. And where do you want to operate out of? So it's a small thing, but it matters. And letting people know I am leaving at 5:00 to hit the gym before I go home and spend time with the kids. It can be done, I think, if we set that precedent early enough. Now, every time? No. But I think it's important, as you say, to work that in, to hold that up for our own good and the good of the people we're leading. And I'll take it even a step further and say, look at the example we're setting when we take care of ourselves. It gives everyone around us permission to take care of themselves, the most precious resource, if you will, in an organization, in humanity, is the self. And if the leader is doing it, then everybody has the permission, I guess, if you will, to do it. And I think that makes for a better organization.
Suppose you were on a battlefield and you know that the enemy is on the other side of the next hill, and your commanding officer is wounded and bleeding so badly that you're not sure he can even get over the hill. But he struggles to his feet and is barely able to hold his weapon in his shaking hand, and he says, "Okay, boys, follow me." One can paint that picture as being heroic and sacrificial. On the other hand, what if he dies halfway up the hill and disorganization functions? Nobody knows who's in charge. What if he would call a medic and take 20 minutes and get that wound bound up and get nourishment and take an IV and get some plasma and be okay? And now he says, "Okay, now follow me." So his act of self-ministry actually is better for his troops than some, cinematic, heroic moment of this bleeding guy trying to lead people up a hill. Get yourself in order if you really care about the people you lead.
I will leave it at that. There is no better way to sum that up. Absolutely. So, kind of moving on to our next topic, because that little red clock just keeps ticking, and I'm like, oh, there's so much to talk about. Well, in Relaunch, you list 7 steps to a successful turnaround. And I'll list them here just for the sake of conversation. You talk about the very first one is facing institutional reality. And you stress the importance of the leader as a visionary in that process. And it can be really hard to get people to face the reality that we need to change and why we need to change. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say, isn't the reality side of things more about project management? Is that really the leader's role? Or do we say, okay, project manager, get the stats, get the task list and the evidence and show us what the reality is?
I think the point you make or the question you make is valid. However, having said that, let me say that one cannot really lead an organization from point A to point B or point D or point Z if you don't know the resources that you have, if you don't even know what kind of resources you have, what are the challenges, you have to really understand the reality. And I believe that many bad mistakes get made in the initial phase of a turnaround because leaders not only don't know institutional reality, they don't want to know it. And they say, look, I know where I want to go with this. Don't confuse me with the facts. Mm-hmm. And facts are friends. They don't limit what you can do. They actually tell you how fast you can do it. So there's the fact that you know the resources, how limited the resources are, that doesn't hinder the vision. It may help you establish a proper time frame for the vision. So, for example, when I took over at Southeastern College, when I went there, Southeastern University, when I left, there were only about 900 students, and it was falling fast. They had reached a peak of 1,250, dropped to 900. There was no cash on hand. That's a horrifying statement. You hear what I just said?
No, I did. That's absolutely terrifying.
There was no cash on hand. They had no debt. But they also didn't have anything the debt would have built. The buildings were decorated in early concentration camp. It was horrible. The dormers, there was one boys' dorm that everybody on the campus called the leper colony. Oh. Okay. So there's no use to walk into that kind of it. The faculty was discouraged. The student body felt disillusioned. They felt they'd been lied to. The board was ready to sell it. The management letter from the audit firm was devastating from the year before I came. So you walk out into the middle of that crowd and you just say, all right, we're going to have 5,000 students next semester. Everybody follow me. They're not inspired. They think you're a psychopath.
Yes.
But if you can say, here's the reality. This is where we are. This is what we have. This is what we don't have. Now, let me tell you where we're going to go first. Follow me to that place, and I'll show you how we get to where we're going to wind up. Now they say, okay, this is a reasoned, thinking, informed leader. Now, the challenge is emotionally, you can't let them see you sweat. So you say all that, then you go in your own office all alone and you say, oh God, what have I done?
Use that half-hour time we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. But there has to be that information. You have to tell them the truth. And you have to tell them the truth without panicking everybody. You don't want to freak everybody out. But if they know the truth and you don't say what they know, they think either you're uninformed or you're lying to them.
Neither is going to turn anything around.
Works in leadership. That's the reason that populations, and I'm not trying to get political, but I'm saying with politics, populations won't follow a leader who keeps telling them everything is okay when they know it isn't. Mm-hmm. They say either this guy thinks he's tricking me or he doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know what's going on. There's got to be some way in which you are able to say, Churchill, I can't promise you anything except blood, sweat, and tears. I can't promise you, except we're going to win and save democracy. That's reality with vision.
I love that. The only way that that vision becomes believable is something that those we're leading, the people in the organization, can wrap their heads around this vision, which is often, that's a heady word, right? That's so ambiguous, is to base it in the reality that sometimes we get from project management and our stats people and all of those. But then it's up to the leader to say, here's all this information and here's what, when we put it together in this order, in this timeline, and add a little of this and that, this could be the end goal here. And I believe that can happen. Since
you gave me the permission to talk biblically, so let's use an example. Okay, people say to me all the time, "I wish I'd been like Jesus. I never had to deal with these kinds of business and leadership decisions." But let's suppose that the ultimate vision is to feed 5,000 people. The first thing you have to know is resource allocation. What do we have? What do we have? 5 loaves, a couple of fish. Okay. Now, what's the next thing? People, organizational skills. You know what the first command Jesus gave was? Tell the people to sit down in groups of 50. So he organized. He has the vision and the supernatural power for a miracle. But the first thing he does is actually managerial. Tell me what resources we have and get the people organized. He doesn't do a random miracle. If he had just told the men, go out there and start throwing the food around, they might have been trampled. So he asked for a managerial report. As you say, a project manager, tell me what we have. What's our COH? What's our fish on hand? And he says, I want to know that. Then he says, all right, now here's how we get everybody organized. So he organized for a miracle. And that's management combined with vision.
That is a wonderful synopsis of your first 2 of the 7 steps to a turnaround, which I think is a fantastic list. I like lists. This one's a really good one. So we already talked about facing institutional reality and communicating the vision, and one without the other is not going to work. And you have aligning market message and medium, creating an executable strategy, shifting culture, keeping an eye on quality, and measuring and celebrating success. And I would love to dive into all of them, but I'm just going to say, buy the book and you will know what we're talking about.
I agree with that.
So in my role as a change management and a leadership consultant, I get a lot of this argument. Okay. Yes, I want to do these 7 things, but right now I don't have the time and I don't have the money to do all 7. So which 3 can I execute right now and get away with and make the change happen? And then we'll do the rest later.
Okay. It's not a bad question. It is, to an extent, a question that those people are asking you, that they're asking you a question that arises out of that, the ubiquitous Western linear way of thinking. We want everything in order. But the challenge is life and leadership doesn't happen like stepping stones out across the front lawn. You kind of have to do them all at the same time. So you don't schedule culture leadership, transformational culture from 8 to 8:30, hard decisions from 8:30 to 9. You kind of have to do them all at the same time. So suppose you're coaching a basketball team. And somebody says, which one is more important, to draw up plays or train your players or try to encourage players that have had a bad game? And the answer is yes. You don't really get to choose all the time. Having said all that, the first 2 really have to be done at the beginning. That is to say, you have to know what the situation is, and you have to be able to cast a vision that people will buy into. But so many of the other things happen in this cycle of life. It's not all linear in that sense. You don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You do 1 and 2, and then you do 3, 6, 5, 4, 2. And maybe that is the art of leadership. Maybe I'm getting a little arty there. I don't know.
That's where my head was going. Yeah, that's the nuance. That's knowing where things go. And then the next time you're facing a change, it will be different.
Yes.
And like raising the next kid or, whatever, it will be different, but basically the same set. And what I'm hearing you saying is no, we can't just say, I'll only do 3 because we'll never get to the other 4. It's a package deal.
Right. It's a package deal. That's it. Leadership is a package deal.
Yeah. And if there isn't the time or the resources, then that's a whole different problem that has to be worked on.
And you work inside the limitations of the time and resources that you have. Mm-hmm. But for example, encouraging the troops that's not, okay, I'll do that this afternoon. You do it all the time, but it blends. It's part of the blend of leadership, but it's inside the given reality of where you are. Mm-hmm. All of leadership has to be contextualized. It's where you are right now in this moment, and where your organization is, where your people are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you said that, because it is true. And again, that points to this artistry at this conceptualized leadership. We have to be sensitive. We have to listen. We have to be able to balance all of those things that we've been talking about, when so often we just want that checklist and a timeline and exactly what action items to get the specific result. And it just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work.
One final point that I want to make sure we touch on, because this is probably the least understood and the least talked about part of leadership, and that is the cost of change. And you speak about it very, very openly in the book. The cost, obviously the cost, the resources, the money, but you also talk about personal cost and organizational cost of change. And we rarely look at that. We always look at the good side, if the outcomes we desire and not the costs. Talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm glad you landed on that, because it is the most, I believe it's the most shocking and most discouraging aspect, because you teach young people. Let me speak to them for a minute. So to new leaders, people beginning, I think the thing that they are the least prepared for is the anger over change, when change is needed, necessary, and obvious. You can see what has to happen. You can see it's needed, it's necessary, and it's obvious. You know what to do. And you do it, and you just say, who would possibly get angry over that? Somebody will. 100%. Everybody wants progress. It's change they hate. And change can make them feel frightened. What is this? Everybody's self-interest rises in the face of change. You say, we have 7 desks in here and we need 5. Immediately, people say, am I going to lose my job? Is this mean they're eliminating 2 positions? So you encounter fear, anger. Functionalism is a big problem in the face of change. So that is, you have lower level employees or volunteers that know what they do and they've forgotten why.
Oh.
And so when you change anything, the only thing they cling to is what they do and the procedure that they have. So if you change anything, it threatens their entire sense of, their raison d'etre. Everything is, they're challenged because that's all they know. So change is high risk leadership. The only thing is, it has to happen.
Yeah.
No leader can change, transform, take an organization up or out of a crisis without change. So you have to be able to set the pace of change. You have to be able to lead people, talk them through it. And you have to have a hide thick enough to understand just the fact that this secretary is angry because you moved her desk 2 inches to the left. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean she's a bad person. It doesn't mean God has died. It just means that there's some crisis in the organization because of a necessary and obvious change that had to happen. And maybe you didn't talk her through it.
Yes.
So it's the constant challenge of leadership is making necessary and obvious changes with the least amount of angst possible, but knowing on the bottom line, you got to do what you got to do. There's some people that are going to be angry. Some people are going to bail out. And those people that can't make the trip with you don't need to be on the bus. But you got to get the hide thick enough. This is what was the biggest shock to me when I started in leadership in my 20s, 1,000 years ago. That I just thought if I was doing the right thing the right way, everybody would like it. And if I could just say to people, you move a vase of flowers on this table and somebody's going to be mad. That doesn't make it wrong.
It points to the importance of a leader knowing the why for the change.
Yes.
And communicating that well, and then having the vision of this is why, and it's leading us here.
Yes.
But I also, I'm going to misquote you in the book, and I from the book, and I apologize.
It may be better than what I wrote, So.
I doubt that, but I'll give it a try. in terms of the costs of change, I think many of us go into change, right? Thinking we are riding in on that proverbial, white stallion and our sword in hand, and we are going to be the heroes or sheroes of the day. When in fact, there are going to be these costs. And one of the costs that you talk about in the book, and here's where I'm going to screw it up, but you said you had to let somebody go, and they weren't on board with the change. And I'm not exactly sure the reasoning behind, but they just were not performing anymore. And the reasoning or the explanation was, I think you're a great person, and I wish you all the best, but my job as a leader is to meet the, uphold the mission of this organization, and you keeping your job is not in the mission. And I thought, wow, holy smokes, it's true. And we want to make sure that nobody gets fired, nobody gets reorged, but that's not the reality. So the costs, I just did a podcast a couple of episodes ago with the layoff lady, and she's been laid off 7 times. And we talked about the lessons that she learned. And laying off can be done with love. So even that can be done with love. But the cost is still there for that person and for ourselves.
Yeah, it is. And there has to be times where if you can't make the tough decisions, resource reallocation. I know your budget has had this amount of money in the past, but I'm not taking everything away from you, but this is the direction we're going in. So I'm going to cut your budget in half, and we're going to double this budget over here. It doesn't mean you're bad people or I don't need what you do, but right now, our strategic priority falls over here, and strategic priorities dictate budget reallocation. If you can't do that, and you try to explain it, you try to lead, you try to communicate it, but if you can't do that, you cannot do executive leadership. Laying somebody off, if you enjoy it, you're a sadist. Right. If you can't do it, you're not a leader. That you're dealing with people, resources, direction, and those things don't always line up exactly the same. Sometimes you need 3 vice presidents and 2 executive directors, but the next year you realize you only need 2 vice presidents and 4 executive directors, and budget dictates that happens. That's where you got to be the person, the leader. That's, if you don't want to be the big cook, don't put on the tall hat. Yeah.
And we forget that side, right? It's like, I'm going to be the big one who comes in and rescues everyone. I have that to contribute, and it's going to be grand and wonderful, and until it isn't. And again, I'm going to cycle back to our earlier conversation and say, at this point, it's important to refill the self, right? To take care of the self because of these tremendous costs. It's exhausting. It's heartbreaking sometimes. Sure. I can get really defensive, and all of these things add up. And so when we are in paying these prices, this cost of change, we really have to make sure we're strong enough to do so.
Absolutely. Leadership is depleting.
Yeah, it really can be. And we so rarely look at that side of it. And I try to emphasize that in my program with, not to be demoralizing, but that realism that you talked about. And when we do take care of ourselves, and we can even, like I said, cut budgets, we can lay people off, but it can be done with love. And that's also mitigating, managing these costs.
Yes.
And they don't have to be as devastating. They will be costly, but they don't have to be completely destructive.
Right.
Beautiful. Well, I am, again, that the clock is just ticking over here in the corner. And so I could do this all day. I say that every time, but it's true every time. But we do have to wrap up today's episode. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. Mark Rutland, what is one message that you would like the Lovin Leadership audience to walk away from this conversation with?
The leader is not simply a function. The leader is a person. And your personhood is your primary responsibility. The leader is a person, the man or woman who's leading. Your own sense of who you are as a person is your number one responsibility. Mm-hmm. And to recover from wounds, rebuild, reshape, take care of your own morals and your mind, and that's your number one responsibility. You cannot give away what you don't have.
Incredible wisdom that should be in every leadership program, and hopefully will be from now on. I'd like to turn it back to you and your organizations currently, and say what's going on in your world, Dr. Rutland. What latest projects or services? What do you want us to know about?
Well, anybody can find more about us at drmarkrutland.com. Listen to my podcast, which is The Leader's Notebook, or they can just put in Dr. Mark Rutland. I hope they will. They can go to Global Servants and particularly look at our girls' homes in Africa and Southeast Asia. We support young girls from 4 or 5 years old right through college. And I hope people would get involved in that. For me personally, my project right now, I've just completed my 20th book. So you were prophetic when you said I had 20 books. I've just, in fact, right before we started recording, I signed the contract. So,
oh, congratulations. We will look forward to that one coming out.
Yeah, in January of 25. And it's a very light and humorous book on aging gracefully.
Well, I look forward to that. And I think we will all benefit from reading that one as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Mark Rutland, for sharing this journey with us, even though it was just an hour of your time. But boy, I just know the wisdom that you've shared will cause amazing ripples through the Lovin Leadership community. And thank you for tuning in to the Lovin Leadership Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share this episode, and hit that notifications button so you won't miss out on a single thing. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it inspires you to hone your skills as an artist of the human spirit to help your people and your organization reach their highest purpose. Remember that leading with love is a superpower that transforms the world around us. So let's go out there and make a difference, one loving act at a time. I'm Dr. Beth Merkel, and I can't wait to connect with you again on the next episode of Lovin Leadership. This podcast was made possible by the College of St. Mary, offering a fast-track opportunity for professionals to achieve a master's degree in organizational leadership online in just 12 months. Tailored for working individuals, our program paves the way for career advancement. Take the next stride in your journey with the College of St. Mary. Apply now at csm.edu/MSOL and unlock your leadership potential today. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey we call Lovin Leadership. Now it's time for you to take action and unleash your true leadership potential. Here are 4 easy steps you can take today. Number 1, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Number 2, share. Share the love with your friends, colleagues, and fellow leaders. Number 3, connect to our Lovin Leadership community by clicking the link below. And finally, take the knowledge and wisdom that you've gained from this podcast and put it into action. The Lovin Leadership Podcast is more than just a podcast. It's a movement. Together, let's rewrite the leadership narrative and create a world where love, passion, and purpose thrive. I can't wait to see the incredible impact you'll make as a Lovin leader. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, lead on with love.